Fair warning, some of these tales may haunt you long after you've heard them. Before we begin, I request you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. On that note, let's begin. The Whistler's Curse. Every night, no matter the weather, a strange figure walked down the street, whistling softly. The sound began faintly near the Carson place at the far end of the lane, gradually growing louder as it moved past the middle of the street. What made it eerie was its consistency. It always started at exactly 3:03 a.m., as if following some strange supernatural schedule. For years, the two siblings had made it a secret ritual to sneak into the kitchen or living room just to listen. They weren't supposed to, of course. Mom and Dad had been firm on the house's single, unwavering rule: never try to look at whatever is whistling. But curiosity in children is hard to stifle, and the mysterious sound pulled them like a moth to a flame. One evening, Holden, the boy from next door, stayed the night while his parents were away. Right from the start, the narrator sensed it would be a bad time. Holden had heard about the whistling. He was curious, almost reckless about it, teasing the siblings with wild theories about who or what made the sound. The narrator tried to dismiss Holden's questions, but Holden was persistent. As the hour approached, Holden revealed something chilling. He had stolen the key to the blinds. In a moment of horror, as the whistling neared, Holden unlocked one of the blinds and snapped it open. The siblings barely had time to react. The narrator shielded his younger sister, Nola, turning her away from the window, eyes shut tight. But Holden, he looked. The whistling stopped. When the narrator opened his eyes, Holden was pale, trembling uncontrollably. Fear had drained him. He had broken the rule. And now, something was different. Holden's terror reached its peak when knocking started at the front door. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was relentless, loud, and then soft, almost as if whatever was outside was playing some twisted game with the family. The knocking spread, pounding on every door, every window of the house, as if something was trying to get in. The family huddled together, refusing to open the door, refusing to look. They stayed like that for the entire night, shaking, waiting for the tapping to stop. By sunrise, the strange phenomenon ceased, leaving them in an oppressive silence. But the damage was done. Holden and his family moved away shortly after that night. Their once vibrant, happy faces were now hollow and drained, marked by an unspeakable trauma. The narrator never saw Holden again, but he knew that the boy's life, and that of his family, would never be the same. The lesson was clear. No one was ever supposed to look. The knock of dread. The suburban calm of Menifee, California, cloaked its sinister undercurrent in the glow of streetlights and children's laughter. For a young couple enjoying their domestic bliss, this evening was like any other, until a faint, unsettling knock echoed through the house. In his room, the protagonist, content with a book in hand and the white noise of a fan, barely registered the sound. But curiosity, or was it dread, drew him to the door. Peering through the peephole, darkness stared back, impenetrable and unnatural. Stepping outside revealed nothing but an eerie stillness, the world seemingly unchanged, yet profoundly wrong. Back inside, an innocuous craving for a midnight snack led him to the kitchen, where a faint draft from an open window tugged at his attention. He dismissed it as an oversight, closing it casually. Upstairs, however, the normalcy of his world began to crumble. The bathroom light spilled across the hall, the faucet running into an empty sink. Yet Amanda, his girlfriend, was nowhere to be found. Then came the note, a stark piece of paper adorned with a bloody fingerprint and an ominous message. "She's in the house. Find her." Panic set in. Room by room, he searched, calling her name, his voice trembling as silence mocked him. Each step echoed his growing despair. Returning to the bedroom, he froze at the sound of dripping water. The bathroom faucet had been turned off, yet the noise persisted, faint and steady. He followed the sound, his movements slow and deliberate. It grew louder as he approached the bed. Kneeling, he lifted the skirt, revealing a small pool of dark red liquid. His breath caught. Hands shaking, he yanked the mattress off the bed frame. Amanda was there, her body folded into the torn box spring. Her face, once so full of life, was pale, her neck a crimson ruin. A scream tore from his throat as he collapsed beside her, grief and terror intermingling. Another note slid from her lifeless body, landing with a soft rustle. Through blurred tears, he picked it up, the bloody fingerprint catching his eye again. Wiping his face with his sleeve, he read the words, each letter stabbing at his sanity. Now, seated in a stark police interrogation room, his trembling hands clutched the remnants of his reality. The warning spills from his lips, a desperate plea to anyone in Menifee. Don't answer the door. Don't be alone. And above all, stay together. And somewhere, beneath the hum of streetlights and the warmth of suburban homes, the darkness listened and waited. Tragedy on autopilot. The day began like so many others, a morning defined by the quiet, comforting rhythm of routine. The man stirred in his bed, awoken by the familiar chime of his phone alarm. Groggy, he reached for the device to silence its persistent buzz, noticing with mild irritation that the battery was lower than it should have been. His phone was new, and it had an annoying tendency to keep applications running in the background, draining power overnight. Deciding it needed a charge, he left it on the kitchen counter rather than placing it in his bag as he normally would. It was a fleeting decision, one he made without much thought. Yet, as he stepped into the shower, his brain resumed its usual routine. The exception, the phone left behind, was already fading from his consciousness, lost to autopilot. Steam billowed in the bathroom as he methodically washed, his mind wandering to the tasks ahead. Work deadlines, a coffee stop on the way, picking up his daughter, Emily, from nursery after work. These were the things he actively thought about, while the small details of his morning operated on a mechanical level. He didn't need to think about grabbing his keys, locking the door, or strapping Emily into her car seat. His body did it for him. Emily was adorable that morning, complaining about the bad sun streaming through the car window. "It's too bright," she said, trying to shift her small body out of its glare. He chuckled, adjusting the rear-view mirror briefly before turning his attention back to the road. The drive was unremarkable, a blur of familiar streets, stoplights, and morning radio chatter. When he arrived at work, the day unfolded as expected. Reports were submitted, meetings were attended. The oppressive summer heat loomed outside, baking the world beyond the cool refuge of the office. His mind, preoccupied with professional matters, didn't stray to the morning's deviation, the phone still on the counter, or the momentary absence of his usual stop at the nursery. It wasn't until mid-morning, during a coffee break, that the illusion began to crack. Reaching into his bag for his phone, his hand brushed empty space. Confusion flickered across his mind. A mental rewind began. The battery had been low. He'd left it charging on the counter. His stomach twisted as the realization settled in. He'd forgotten it. But the danger lay deeper than the forgotten phone. The routine had broken in more ways than one. The hours dragged on, the summer sun turning the outdoors into a furnace. Tarmac bubbled in the relentless heat. The smell of barbecues mingled with the acrid scent of melting asphalt. Office workers shed their ties and rolled up their sleeves. He thought little of the heat. His office was air-conditioned, a bubble of artificial coolness insulated from the blistering world outside. When the workday ended, he drove home, distracted by the day's events. As he pulled into the driveway, the crunch of gravel beneath his tires provided a fleeting moment of comfort. His wife greeted him at the door, her smile fading as she asked, "Where's Emily?" The question hit him like a thunderclap. His breath caught in his throat, and his knees threatened to buckle. Emily wasn't home. She hadn't been dropped off at nursery. In the blur of his morning autopilot, He'd driven straight to work without a second thought. Frantic, he jumped back into the car, his mind racing as he retraced his steps. At the nursery, he was greeted by an unfamiliar sight, a sign taped to the front door. Due to vandalism overnight, please use side door. Today only. The words made his blood run cold. The door was fine this morning, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. He had not been there. Emily had stayed in the car. The drive to work replayed in his mind, each moment a haunting echo. Her small voice had gone silent. She'd shifted out of the sun, seeking shade. She'd been so quiet, so still, that he hadn't noticed. The sun had blazed all day. The car, parked under its relentless glare, had turned into an oven. His hands trembled as he approached the vehicle, the acrid smell he'd dismissed earlier now suffocating. With a shaking hand, he opened the car door. The truth he saw inside shattered him. Emily, his sweet, vibrant daughter, was gone, her small body lifeless in the back seat. The phone, the counter, the routine. He collapsed to his knees, his wail of grief tearing through the suffocating silence. The world blurred around him, the pieces of his shattered life falling like glass to the ground. Autopilot had disengaged, but far too late. Smile of the insane. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. Alex found himself walking near a police-patrolled park, a quiet area far from his apartment. The night was calm, quieter than usual. The city had a sort of surreal stillness about it, the air heavy with an odd calmness. There were no cars, no sounds, just the occasional distant murmur of the wind. The park, as usual, stood completely empty, its shadows stretching in the moonlight. As Alex turned down a side street, heading back toward his apartment, he first noticed something odd. At the far end of the street, he saw the silhouette of a man. He didn't think much of it at first, probably someone else out for a late-night walk. But as he got closer, the figure did something strange. It was dancing. The man's movements were jerky yet smooth, like a waltz, but with an unnatural lurch at the end of each step, as if he was floating rather than walking. Alex, thinking the man was likely drunk, moved as far as he could to the side to give the dancer some space. The closer the man came, the stranger his movements seemed. He was tall and thin, wearing an old, outdated suit, but it was his face that really unsettled Alex. The man's eyes were wide open, unblinking, staring at the sky, his mouth stretched into an unnatural, eerie grin, one that was far too wide for comfort. Something in Alex's gut twisted. He didn't want to be anywhere near this person. With a growing unease, he crossed the street to avoid the man. But as soon as he stepped onto the opposite curb, Alex froze. He glanced back, and to his horror, the man had stopped dancing and was now standing perfectly still, with one foot in the street, facing him. His smile hadn't wavered. His eyes still stared at the heavens, his head tilted back unnaturally. A shiver crawled up Alex's spine, and for the first time in years, he felt truly scared. Determined to ignore the bizarre sight, Alex kept walking, trying to put more distance between himself and the strange man. But as he moved forward, he glanced back, only to find the figure was no longer where he had left him. He was gone, vanished. For a brief moment, Alex thought he had imagined it all. But as he looked around, his stomach dropped. There, across the street, was the man again, crouched low, hidden in the shadows. He was staring at Alex, and though Alex couldn't make out the details, he could feel the man's gaze piercing through him. How had the man moved so quickly? It was as though he had crossed the distance in the blink of an eye. Frozen, Alex stood there, staring back, unable to move, unable to look away. And then the man started moving toward him again. This time it wasn't a dance. He moved in exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as though sneaking up on someone in a cartoon. but it was the speed at which he moved that made Alex's blood run cold. The man was approaching him faster than any human should be able to move. By now, Alex's heart was hammering in his chest, his breath shallow. Yet he didn't run. He just stood there, paralyzed by the sight of the man coming closer and closer and closer. The man stopped again, just a car length away, his smile never wavering, his eyes still lost in the sky. When Alex finally found his voice, it was weak, a tremor in his throat. What he meant to shout was, "What the hell do you want?" But what escaped his lips was more of a scared, breathless, "What the?" The man didn't respond. He didn't flinch, didn't react. He just stood there smiling, his head tipped back. There was a terrifying, inhuman stillness to him now. Then, with a sudden, slow motion, the man turned away. He started walking back the way he had come, his dance walking slow and deliberate. Alex, terrified to turn his back, watched him go. He was almost out of sight when Alex thought it was safe. But then, just when he thought the nightmare was over, the man stopped moving. The figure grew larger, closer, faster. The man wasn't walking anymore. He was running toward Alex at a speed that defied reason. Alex didn't wait to find out what would happen next. Panic overtook him, and he broke into a sprint. His legs moved faster than he had ever run before, pumping with raw adrenaline. He didn't dare glance back, but he couldn't shake the image of that wild smile and those eyes staring at him from the shadows. By the time Alex reached a better lit road, far from the side street, he looked back once more. The figure was gone. He didn't see the man, didn't hear him. He kept running, his heart racing, the terror still gripping him. And even when he finally reached the safety of his apartment, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. For the next 6 months, Alex stayed in that city, but he never walked alone at night again. The image of that man, his eerie dance, and that insane smile stayed with him long after the night had ended. He knew, deep down, that what he had seen wasn't just some strange drunk or an odd character. It was something else, something far more disturbing, something that had haunted him, waiting for the moment he'd forget the safety of the daylight. And he never would again. Betsy the doll. In a small, run-down apartment, a 5-year-old girl lived with her neglectful, drug-addicted mother. The little girl, Laura, spent her early years surrounded by the haze of smoke and the chaos of constant partying. Her world was limited: a mattress, a blue and white toy chest, and 3 toys, with her doll, Betsy, being her closest companion. Betsy was more than just a toy. To Laura, the doll was a confidant and partner in her lonely and chaotic existence. Betsy spoke to Laura, encouraging her to act out in ways that got her in trouble, whether it was stealing food or confronting the bad man who often slept on their couch. Betsy always seemed to push Laura into situations that left her punished and misunderstood by her mother. For the young girl, Betsy was both a source of comfort and the scapegoat for her mischief. Around her 6th birthday, Laura asked her mother for a party, hoping to win favor with the mean girls at school. Her mother dismissed the idea, pointing out their poverty and accusing Laura of being the cause of their dwindling resources, citing the food Betsy ate. Crushed and overwhelmed by feelings of rejection and unfairness, Laura retreated to her room, her anger bubbling over. In a fit of rage, she attacked Betsy, throwing her into the toy chest and slamming the lid shut, vowing never to play with her again. Life changed abruptly after that. Authorities intervened, taking Laura away to a new foster home in a different state. Over the years, Laura grew up in a loving environment, leaving her troubled past behind. She built a successful life with a family of her own, burying the memories of her early years deep in her subconscious. Decades later, Laura, now 30, received a voicemail from her estranged mother, who had just been paroled. Despite her resentment, Laura called her back, seeking closure. During the conversation, Her mother apologized profusely for the chaos of Laura's childhood and, to Laura's confusion, for what happened to Betsy. Laura dismissed her mother's remarks, stating that Betsy was still where she had left her, in the toy chest. Silence hung over the call before her mother uttered words that shattered Laura's reality. "What do you mean Betsy is in the toy chest? What did you do to your sister?" At first, Laura laughed off the notion, accusing her mother of delusional ramblings. But as her mother wept and spoke of Betsy's disappearance and the police investigation, fragmented memories began to surface. Laura's insistence that Betsy was just a doll wavered as she realized her childhood might not have been what she remembered. Compelled by growing dread, Laura entered the backyard shed where her children used the old toy chest as a makeshift tea table. She hesitated, her mind racing with suppressed memories and dark possibilities. Slowly, she unlatched the chest and lifted the lid. Inside lay the truth. Betsy wasn't a doll. She never was. Laura's mind reeled as she confronted the horrifying realization. As a child, in her confusion and trauma, she had mistaken her little sister, a frail, starving, and neglected child, for a plaything. And in her fit of rage all those years ago, she had ended Betsy's life, hiding the evidence in that blue and white toy chest. The weight of the revelation crashed down on Laura, threatening to unravel the life she had worked so hard to rebuild. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe for more scary stories.